It was the stillness that caught me first. The heavy, unspoken silence of an early morning. The kind of quiet that settles deep into the bones, like it's waiting for something. The air was cool but soft, the kind of morning breeze that feels like a sigh, fleeting yet constant. I stood there, in front of my mother's grave, my hand resting on the weathered stone. The name etched there felt foreign to me, even after all these years. It was as though someone else had lived her life, someone I hadn't known or had forgotten. I had been coming here every week for the past few months, not for closure, not for peace. No, I came here because this was the only place where I felt close to her, where the weight of loss wasn't so overwhelming. There was comfort in the ritual. The flowers, the quiet moments by her side, the feeling of her spirit, maybe, still lingering. But on that day, as I stood there in the half-light, something broke that quiet. It was a sound. Faint at first, distant, like a whisper against the wind. It didn't make sense to me at first. I looked around, confused, almost irritated. It was the barking. A low, desperate bark that carried through the stillness. It was coming from the far end of the cemetery. My heart thudded once, twice, but I dismissed it. Probably just a dog wandering the grounds, someone's pet lost in its search. But then it came again, the bark ringing louder this time, like it was trying to tell me something important. Without thinking, I walked towards the sound. The closer I got to the source of the barking, the more I began to notice the small things. The way the grass was crushed in places, a trail leading towards the edge of the cemetery, where the trees stood tall like sentinels. And then, almost hidden beneath an old oak tree, I saw it, a dog, small, frail, with patches of dirt and leaves clinging to its fur. It was a little puppy, its coat a tangle of white and brown. But it wasn't the dog that caught my attention first, no. It was what was lying beside it, a small, faded scarf. I crouched down, unsure whether to approach. The dog seemed to sense me, its ears twitching before its wide, soulful eyes locked onto mine. It was the kind of gaze that penetrates deep, a mix of fear, pain, and recognition. There was something in its eyes that felt like a distant echo of my own grief. The scarf was embroidered, frayed around the edges, and there was something oddly familiar about it, like I'd seen it before. But where, as I reached for the scarf, the puppy shuffled closer, nudging it towards me with a soft whine. Its tail gave a hesitant wag, and my chest tightened, suddenly flooded with the impulse to comfort it. I picked up the scarf, and as I ran my fingers over the fabric, I found something else. A small, tattered note folded neatly inside the folds. It was a simple message, barely legible. Written in shaky handwriting, "Please take care of her. She's all I have left. Her name is Daisy." I didn't know why I stayed. I didn't know why. After all the years of grief that had come crashing down on me since losing my mother, I was standing there in a cemetery, holding a scarf and a scared, lonely puppy. But something about her, pulled me in. I took her with me. Daisy, as the note had said, became a part of my life. Reluctantly at first, both of us adjusting to this new and strange companionship. I was a teacher, retired now, but my life felt empty. After my son had left, I had stopped living in so many ways. The house felt cold, the days blurred into one long, quiet ache. But Daisy had a way of filling the emptiness. Her playful yips, her soft nudge when I sat too long in silence. Slowly, almost without realizing, I began to let her in. The first breakthrough came a week later, when I took Daisy to the park for the first time. There was a little girl there, sitting on the swings clutching a stuffed bear. She looked lonely, her eyes dark and hollow, the kind of sadness that only a child should never have to know. Daisy bounded over, tail wagging furiously, and without missing a beat, the girl smiled, just for a moment. It was small, fleeting, but it was there. I caught it, and in that moment, I felt something stir inside me too. Maybe it was a flicker of hope, maybe it was a memory of how things used to feel before all of this. The days turned into weeks, and Daisy's presence began to change things. Not just for me, but for others too. The students at the school, my old colleagues, even the patients I volunteered with at the hospice. They all began to warm to her. Her soft eyes, her gentle nature, somehow allowed people to open up. I watched a child with speech difficulties begin to utter her first words in weeks, as if Daisy had unlocked something inside of her. I saw a patient, bedridden for months, finally crack a smile, his hand reaching out to gently pet Daisy's head as she sat by his side. I could see what was happening. Daisy wasn't just helping me heal. She was healing the world around her, piece by piece, quietly and with an ease that only animals seem to possess. But there was more. Daisy had come to me for a reason, just as much as I had come to her. The realization hit me hard one evening when I was sitting by the fireplace, Daisy curled up at my feet, the scarf still draped over her bed. There was something about the scarf, something about the way it felt in my hands, that made me wonder. I hadn't thought about it much before, but now, as I traced the worn fabric, I felt an overwhelming urge to find out more. Who had left her there? I couldn't shake the feeling that the scarf was more than just an item of comfort. It was a link, a tangible connection to the life Daisy had left behind. I spent the next few days asking around, checking local shelters and speaking to the few people who might remember. I was hesitant, unsure of what I would find, but there was a pull deep inside that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't until I spoke to Mrs. Carter, an elderly neighbor who lived 2 streets down, that I got a break. She remembered seeing a young woman around the time Daisy had first appeared in the cemetery. A woman who had been in tears, holding a small puppy close to her chest, and who had seemed defeated. Mrs. Carter couldn't recall much, but the mention of the scarf triggered something in me. That evening, I took Daisy back to the cemetery. The air had turned cold, a chill settling in that matched the weight in my chest. I stood by my mother's grave again, Daisy by my side, and I stared down at the ground where I had first found her. Something about that place felt sacred now, as though it wasn't just the site of my grief, but of a shared sorrow that connected Daisy to me. And then it hit me. The scarf was more than just a token of love. It was a symbol of loss. Daisy hadn't been abandoned. She had been left behind in an act of impossible love. Someone had given her up, knowing she couldn't keep her, but wanting her to find a home where she could be safe. It broke me, this realization. I thought of the young woman, somewhere, likely heartbroken, but with no other choice. My heart hurt for her too. A stranger, yet somehow tied to me through Daisy. I understood the kind of love it took to make such a painful decision. A week later, I received a call that would change everything. It was from a local animal rescue, someone who had been looking for Daisy's owner. The person on the other end explained that a woman had come forward, a woman who had been searching for Daisy for months after being forced to give her up. Her name was Sarah, and when she described the scarf, I knew instantly. It was her, Daisy's first and only family. We agreed to meet at the shelter the next morning. The moment Sarah walked through the door, I could see the tear tracks on her face, her eyes red, rimmed from weeks of worry and uncertainty. She was small, frail almost, but the strength in her gaze was undeniable. I saw it right away. The connection between her and Daisy, even if the puppy hadn't yet recognized her. But Daisy knew. She knew somehow, as if the memories were hidden beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to surface. Sarah knelt down and whispered something to Daisy. The dog's ears perked up, and her tail began to wag. There was a hesitation, a moment of recognition, and then Daisy was in her arms, licking her face, her bark muffled by the tears that fell freely from Sarah's eyes. It wasn't a dramatic reunion, no grand gestures. It was simple. It was real. As I watched them, I realized something. This wasn't about Daisy being rescued. It wasn't about me saving her. We had both needed something. Daisy had needed a place to call home, and Sarah had needed closure, peace. And I needed to understand that healing isn't linear. It's messy. It's full of grief, love, and sometimes, even in our pain, we give someone else the strength to keep going. In the weeks that followed, Sarah would visit me often, bringing Daisy along. It was like we were all healing together, our lives intertwined in ways we hadn't anticipated. I watched as Sarah grew stronger, no longer haunted by the shadow of guilt and loss. Daisy had returned to her, but she had returned in a different way. Not as a puppy, but as a symbol of hope and second chances. The school where I had once taught became a place where Daisy was a beloved companion. I took her in for show and tell, where she became a bridge between children who had trouble speaking or expressing themselves. The children who had withdrawn, afraid to open up after experiencing trauma, began to find their voices, and those moments were priceless. There was the girl who had once been too shy to speak. After Daisy nuzzled her hand and sat at her feet, she spoke her first words in months. "Thank you." There was the patient in the hospice, a man who hadn't smiled in weeks. The first time he saw Daisy, sitting patiently by his side, he grinned, a small, knowing smile that filled the room with warmth. Daisy didn't do anything spectacular. She didn't perform tricks or follow commands. She was just there, present in a way that words could never capture. And slowly, I realized that the healing Daisy had given me wasn't just about the scars left by the death of my mother or the loss of my son. It was the healing of my ability to love again, to open my heart when it felt easiest to shut it off. The last time I saw Sarah and Daisy together, they were standing at the cemetery, the same place where I had first found her. Daisy was happily wagging her tail at Sarah's feet, her nose sniffing the air with curiosity. I watched as Sarah gently placed a flower on my mother's grave, a simple act of remembrance. She looked at me then, her eyes full of understanding, and said, "Thank you for bringing us back together. I think we both needed saving in different ways." I smiled softly. "We all did," I replied. As I stood there, in the quiet that followed, I realized that I wasn't the only one who had found healing in this journey. Daisy had saved us both in ways that words couldn't express. She had filled the silence with life and love, reminding us all that second chances are the gift we give each other, even when we're not sure we deserve them. It's strange how the world works. Sometimes the thing we need most isn't a grand, sweeping gesture. Sometimes it's the quiet presence of an animal, a small puppy with soulful eyes that teaches us how to heal, how to love again. So if you're reading this, I want you to remember something. Healing doesn't come from what we expect. It comes from the unexpected. It comes from those small moments of connection, those tiny acts of kindness. And sometimes it comes from a dog named Daisy. If you've been touched by Daisy's story, I encourage you to support animal rescue organizations, share this story, and believe in kindness again, because every dog deserves a second chance, and so do we.